Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today with a bit of a mental exercise. I want you to close your eyes and imagine a puzzle.
Okay.
But not the nice, neat 500-piece landscape you do on a rainy Sunday. Imagine a puzzle that is infinite.
That sounds more like a nightmare than a pastime.
Right. You fit one piece in, you think you finally got the corner figured out, and suddenly the borders expand, the colors shift, and you realize you were looking at a tiny, insignificant fraction of the whole image.
It's a vivid metaphor, but knowing today's topic, it feels pretty appropriate.
It is the only way to describe the ecosystem we are unpacking today. Modern shopping. And I know shopping sounds mundane. We click buy, a box shows up 2 days later. Simple.
So we think.
Exactly. But the deeper we looked into the source material for this deep dive, the more I realized that clicking that button is just the tip of a massive iceberg. We are talking behavioral psychology, intense logistics, geopolitical strategy. It's high-stakes gambling.
It is an ecosystem in the truest sense of the word. And to navigate it, we aren't just looking at dry market reports today. We are looking at the career and the body of work of a specific figure in the Israeli e-commerce scene, Timur Gordon.
We have a really interesting stack of sources here. His professional portfolio, his CV, which is honestly exhausting just to look at.
It is.
And the archives of his long-running show, Kommerseyschen. Our mission today is to unpack how this one guy's career, from founding major platforms to studying philosophy, mirrors the evolution of digital retail.
And mirrors is the right word, because when you track Gordon's trajectory, you aren't just seeing a resume, you are seeing the history of how the internet changed the way humans trade and interact.
Yeah, over the last 2 decades. So let's unpack this. We have to start with the architect of the scene, Timur Gordon. And here is where the sources immediately threw me a curveball. Yeah. You look at a tech leader, a guy who has been a CEO of major platforms. You expect a background in computer science, maybe an MBA in finance.
The standard Silicon Valley roadmap.
Yeah. Exactly. But Gordon, he holds an MA with honors from Tel Aviv University in philosophy, science, and digital culture.
That stood out to me as well. I mean, it is incredibly unusual in the high-stakes world of e-commerce.
Right.
Usually this industry is run by people obsessed with code or conversion rates or, customer acquisition costs.
Yeah, the numbers.
But Gordon's academic foundation suggests he views digital culture as a human phenomenon first and a transaction second.
It's like he's analyzing the why before the how.
Precisely.
Right.
If you look at his work, he treats digital culture as a subject of inquiry, almost like an anthropologist.
But, and this is important for you to grasp, don't let the philosophy degree fool you.
No.
He's not just sitting in a library theorizing. The man is a builder.
Oh, absolutely. His professional track record is heavy.
He was a founder and the first CEO of Yad2. For anyone not familiar with the local market, that is a massive deal.
It is. Yad2 essentially revolutionized the secondhand market in the region. Before that, you had Resepaper, classifieds, static, slow, expensive. Yad2 created a liquid, real-time market that requires serious operational chops to build.
And he didn't stop there. He served as the CEO of Azrieli.com, which is the e-commerce arm of one of the biggest retail groups in the country.
And he founded ARC Interactive, so he's been in the trenches of both pure play, digital startups, and legacy retail giants trying to figure out the internet.
And he is still active. His current role involves senior consulting for top-tier clients. We saw names in the source material like Schiffersal Online, Strauss, Netafim, Caesarstone. He's even consulting for the Israeli Ministry of Economy's National Digital Array.
That last one is interesting.
It is, isn't it? It implies that e-commerce has moved from just private business to national infrastructure. But we can get to that later.
Right. But that combination, the philosopher, the CEO, and the educator, he lectures in MBA programs too, is crucial. He isn't just an observer. He is a strategist who has actively shaped the infrastructure of the local market.
So when he talks about e-commerce, he knows where the friction points are. Which brings us to the centerpiece of our source material. Kommerseyschen. First of all, great name. A play on conversation and commerce.
It is clever. And he defines the project in a very specific way. He calls it a podcast documentary.
I loved that term. It implies that he's not just chatting.
No.
He's documenting something.
He is documenting the formation of a business sector in real time. The show has been running since 2019 with over 150 discussions.
And just think about what has happened in that time.
I know. COVID, supply chain crises, wars. By listening to these, you aren't just hearing interviews, you're hearing the history of a sector as it happened.
And the core definition he gives for this show is simply conversation about commerce. But his goal is much bigger. He says he's trying to build the puzzle of the new retail world.
And this goes back to your intro, the puzzle. What I found fascinating in the analysis of the show's guest list is his value chain approach.
What do you mean by that?
Well, many business shows just interview the CEOs, the stars.
Right, the people with the polished talking points.
Exactly. But Gordon talks to everyone. Retailers, yes, but also entrepreneurs, investors, logistics experts, UX UI designers, customer service managers.
So he's mapping the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. If you only talk to the CEO, you get the vision. If you talk to the logistics manager or the customer service rep, you get the reality.
You understand how the package actually gets to the door.
Or why it didn't.
Right. And there's a note here in the sources about inclusivity that I think is important. He places a specific emphasis on hosting wonderful women in the industry.
Yes, and ensuring diverse perspectives seems to be a priority for him. Retail and commerce are heavily driven by female consumers and increasingly by female executives.
So by ensuring that representation, he's painting a more accurate picture of the industry.
Yeah, rather than just the male-dominated boardroom stereotype.
So we have the philosopher CEO and his documentary projects, but let's get into the meat of it. What are they actually talking about? Because some of these episodes get into really sticky strategic dilemmas.
They do. And there is one case study from the sources that perfectly illustrates this. It's from episode 155, titled The Laundry Dilemma.
The Laundry Dilemma. It sounds like a generic thriller movie.
I know.
But it's actually about detergent.
It is about detergent, but it represents a massive shift in modern business. It addresses the direct-to-consumer, or DTC, conflict.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener.
Yeah.
Because we see this everywhere now. You used to buy Nike at a shoe store. Now you buy it from Nike.com. You used to buy laundry soap at the supermarket now. Well, that's the question.
Right. The core question Gordon and Qatar discuss is, should a manufacturer sell directly to customers or stick to distributors and retail chains?
It sounds simple.
But the risks are huge.
Because if I'm a supermarket buyer and I see the laundry brand I stock starting to sell directly to my customers cutting me out, I'm going to be pretty angry, right?
Exactly. That is called channel conflict. If you sell direct, you are essentially competing with your own partners, the retail chains that give you massive exposure.
So the question becomes, is the opportunity of direct sales worth the risk of angering your biggest distributors?
Yeah.
And what is the opportunity? Why risk it?
Data and relationship. That is the flip side. If you buy soap at the Mega Mart, the soap company doesn't know who you are.
Right. No idea.
They don't have your email. They don't know your habits. If you go direct, you own the data. You can build a relationship. You can upsell.
So it's a trade-off. Reach versus data.
Precisely. And in the episode, they discuss how you build that relationship if you decide to take the leap. It's not just about setting up a website.
It's about brand strategy.
It is. Why would a customer bother to go to a separate site just for soap? You have to offer something the supermarket can't. Bundles, subscriptions, specific scents.
It's fascinating that a conversation about laundry detergent can reveal so much about the tension between old-school retail and the digital age.
That is the beauty of the Kommersiichen archives. It takes specific verticals and extracts universal lessons.
And speaking of verticals, the breadth here is wild. I was looking through the episode list, and it's like walking through a virtual mall where you have a master key to the back offices.
It really is. You have coffee with an interview with Schiedua from Nespresso.
Now, Nespresso's interesting because they are the kings of that club feel.
Exactly. They turned a commodity coffee into a luxury membership. That's a pure branding play. But then you jump to something totally different, like jewelry with Schlomit Urfer.
Which is much more emotional, much more visual.
And then sports and wellness. There's Ripple Yoga in episode 145 and a heavy hitter, Decathlon, in 144.
Decathlon is fascinating because they are a giant physical retailer that had to pivot to digital. They control everything from the design of the tent to the sale.
Vertical integration, yeah. It makes their e-commerce challenges unique. But the show also goes into really niche markets. There's an episode about fan shops.
Right.
And something called the Hoop, or Hachishuk.
Which just proves that e-commerce isn't just for the giants. It's for these community-driven microeconomies.
But Gordon doesn't just stick to consumer goods. The sources mention he covers heavy business topics, mergers and acquisitions, M&A, specifically within the e-commerce space.
Which is huge. Big companies buying smaller tech firms to get their tech or their customer base.
And B2B commerce, business-to-business selling online. This is often overlooked by the general public, but it is actually a larger market than consumer retail.
It's just less sexy.
A lot less sexy, because it's about ordering industrial supplies or office equipment.
But the complexity there must be insane. Different pricing for every client, bulk orders, contracts.
Exactly, and digitizing that is much harder than selling a t-shirt. But there was one specific topic in the archives that really stopped me in my tracks.
Oh.
It wasn't about selling soap or yoga mats. It was about crisis management. Specifically, episode 124, Special E-commerce in War.
Yes, this is a critical inclusion. It takes the conversation out of business and into survival.
It highlights the resilience and adaptability of the industry. They discuss the concept of an ORIF mall, which translates to rear or home front mall.
So literally how the industry adapts when the geopolitical situation explodes.
Correct. When physical stores might be closed or dangerous to visit, or when supply lines are disrupted, how does digital commerce step in?
It stops being about convenience and starts being about keeping the economy moving.
Exactly. The logistics network, the drivers, the distribution centers, effectively becomes a parallel infrastructure. It ensures people can get food, supplies, and equipment even when the physical world is shut down.
It shows that e-commerce isn't just a luxury. In modern times, it's critical infrastructure. That really drives home the point that this isn't just about shopping. It's about how society functions. Which brings us to the evolution of consumption itself. Gordon seems to have a very specific view on where this is all going.
He does. He synthesizes all these conversations into a view that e-commerce is driving the next generation of consumption. He describes it as simpler, faster, and personalized.
And he makes a distinction between retail and commerce, right?
Yes, and this is a subtle but important philosophical shift fitting for his background. Retail implies a place, a store, a shelf. It's a destination. Commerce is a broader term. It encompasses the entire transaction, the relationship, the logistics, the digital lifestyle.
So commerce isn't a place you go. It's something that happens.
It's ambient. It's everywhere. It's in your social media feed. It's in your smart home device. And I also appreciate that the source material mentions he interviews people who failed, not just the unicorns who made $1 billion.
That is vital, because business media loves a winner.
They do. Survivorship bias is a real problem. If you only look at the winners, you think success is easy or inevitable.
Right.
But Gordon interviews what the notes call distinct figures like the Wonder Boy of Laundry or the people of Busy, but acknowledges the struggles.
It's not a highlight reel. It's the game tape.
Exactly. He looks at the failures, the logistics meltdowns, the cash flow crunches. That honesty is what allows you as a listener to actually learn rather than just be entertained.
So what does this all mean? We've got a guy who started in philosophy, built the biggest classified site in the country, and has spent the last 5 years documenting every nut and bolt of the industry.
I think the key takeaway is that understanding the backstage of e-commerce changes your relationship with the world around you.
Yeah.
Whether you are an entrepreneur trying to sell a product, an employee working in logistics, or just a shopper waiting for a package.
You realize that the package didn't just appear. It traveled through a web of strategic decisions, technological innovations, and human effort.
And you realize that the distinction between online and offline is basically gone. It is all just commerce now. The digital and physical are completely interwoven.
It goes back to that infinite puzzle we started with. Gordon describes his work as building this puzzle, but here's a thought. If digital commerce is constantly evolving, expanding into B2B, taking over social media, adapting to wars and crises, will the puzzle ever actually be finished?
That is the question. And perhaps the answer is no. Perhaps the chaos of constant change isn't a phase we are going through. Maybe chaos is just the new permanent state of retail.
And maybe the goal isn't to finish the puzzle, but just to get better at finding the pieces that fit in the moment.
A philosophical ending for a deep dive on a philosopher's CEO.
It feels appropriate. We'll leave you with that thought to mull over the next time you click Add to Cart. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Thank you.
Audio.